So it's the same for cannabis in Humboldt. Those special areas, for some reason, that combination of soil and air and rain and maybe the farmer's love and dedication over generations creates some of the best cannabis on the planet.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ganjha Show. So our guest for today is really special. She's Kimberly, also known as Madam Cannoli. She's the widow of Frenchy Cannoli. We've had him on the podcast. I think he was my first or second guest. You can watch the podcast and learn more about him in that episode. She's also managing the Frenchy Cannoli Brands right now, taking his work forward. So let's just get into it. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's talk about why you're here in Niagara from the US to promote basically Frenchy's documentary.
Yes. So we made a documentary called Frenchy Dreams of Hashish.
Mm-hmm.
It was directed by the filmmaker Jake Remington, who traveled with Frenchy for a couple of years during the harvest season when Frenchy would go up north to Humboldt and Mendocino counties to see the farmers that he was working with when we had a manufacturing facility in California. So the timing was really lucky because it was the last year when it was medical use in California,
Mm-hmm.
which was one legal structure. And then we transitioned into the adult use recreational market, which was another. And so it kind of shows the impact that had on the farmers that had been working under the medical laws for 20 years and what happened when recreational went into effect.
Yeah.
And for many of the farmers, that meant that they could no longer be cannabis farmers because there were zoning regulations that cut out some people. There was a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of money involved.
So I mean, obviously we can watch the movie to know more, but as I understand, in medical it was just like if you had a growing license, you could basically give it to someone else to grow it for you, and they didn't really need any more licensing other than that. So has that changed now because of the adult use regulations or something?
So under medical, they had a structure where people needed to go to a doctor to get a card to say that you were a medical cannabis patient. And then you could work with a provider. It was called creating a script where you could say to that provider, I want you to supply the cannabis for me. Here's my card. Sign me up to be part of your network.
Yeah.
And those providers were allowed to have a certain number of people in their infrastructure. And based on those number of people, that would determine how many plants they could grow.
Yeah.
And so it was a pretty easy infrastructure, pretty easy system, easy to pay taxes.
Yeah.
It was nice in that there was basically the person growing, the person manufacturing, and the patient.
Yeah.
So there were not a lot of layers of expense.
Yeah.
So because of that, the person growing could get a fair wage for their efforts. The person manufacturing equally could make some money. And then the patient wasn't needing to pay such an extraordinary, sum to get good, clean medicine. So that worked very well for 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, the supply chain is so easy because the person growing already knew that he was going to get rid of all of his inventory without even thinking much about it. That's so crazy to think that.
Because it was based on the people that he was serving, and
exactly.
He knew how many people he was serving. And I think also in that infrastructure, there were certain cultivars that were known to be good for certain illnesses because all of this started, we owe the whole legacy of medical cannabis in California to the unfortunate situation with the gay community and the AIDS crisis. It was through their insight, they realized that sick people who didn't have an appetite, if they consumed cannabis, that would give them appetite, and it also reduced some of the pain that they were experiencing. So they lobbied to have access to cannabis for therapeutic use, and that allowed then doctors to recommend it for a whole variety of other treatments because cannabis is so beneficial for such a wide variety of therapeutic use. So it was a pretty straightforward system. It worked really well. And then they went into recreational. and outside interests came into play,
Yeah.
thinking, oh, there's so much money to be made here. They added layers of distribution. They required that the product be distributed through dispensaries. And suddenly, those people were making all the money, and the people who had been doing all the work for all this time
Yeah.
were left out.
Yeah.
And it's created a huge crisis in California. We have so many farmers that are no longer able to farm because these larger entities came on, they started growing enormous volume, more volume than the consumers needed, and the prices just have been gutted.
Yeah.
And also the quality has really been negatively impacted.
Yeah, because I think earlier people were focusing more on like taking care of illnesses, focusing more on the patient. Now it's either about getting rid of the inventory. It's become more of a business. And then the money that came in, I think recent study that came here in Canada was Canada destroyed, I think 3 times more cannabis than it actually sold.
It's criminal. Well, and I was thinking about that flying here because I just showed the film in New York the other day. The Emerald Triangle, which is that part of California where they grow cannabis, Mendocino, Humboldt, and Trinity County, they were always known for quality because you had generations of family that were growing, and there was a lot of pride. These were small farms that were very proud of their product. And so there was almost like a little friendly neighborhood competition in who could grow the highest quality, the best cannabis, the most agreeable to smoke, the best flavor, the best mental state. And suddenly, in the space of 5 years, we've gone to just very, very low quality product in most of those stores because you run into this challenge when you start to have these mega grows. It's very hard to maintain quality. They have challenges with pests and just, all sorts of issues.
Because it's humanly impossible to, like, if you have thousands of square feet of grow, it's kind of impossible to have like so many people looking at each plant. Whereas on the other side, when you're growing craft or low scale, people actually want to grow your plant by love and all of those things also. I know Frenchy used to say a lot about giving the credit to the farmers. And do you still see those farmers? Some of them are still there or are providing a good quality service.
I mean, some of them are still there fighting the good fight, and yes, they still make very, very high quality cannabis. They're featured in the film. They're part. There's a group of them in the film that all live on this area of the Humboldt Coast called the Lost Coast. And they've created a Lost Coast Farmers Guild. So one of the things that we're doing with the film is we're giving 20% of the proceeds from the film to a nonprofit called the Origins Council. And the Origins Council is working with the Lost Coast Farmers Guild. They're part of their network to do scientific studies on cannabis terroir, which means studies to understand why cannabis grown in Humboldt along that coastal area, what's so special about it? Why is it so world renowned for being among the best cannabis on the planet? And so we're really happy to be able to support their efforts with proceeds from the film, and really interested to see what the studies are going to show.
I've heard so many things about it. Like Humboldt County is known as like one of the best, if not the best place to actually have. I obviously don't have the privilege yet to go there, but I'm very close now. So I definitely want to go there. But you guys are already studying it, but what is actually there? Is it just because it's so much of generational knowledge, or is it because they had to hide for so long that the only thing they could focus was just growing the highest quality cannabis?
So I think it's the environment, so it's an area that has beautiful redwood forests all over. It's an area that's very hard to go to. So there's not other agricultural products there. There hasn't been a lot of pollution. It's also an area that has layers of mineral deposits, so the water filtered through it is among the most pure water on the earth. It's right on the coast, so they get the fog that comes in to give water to the plants. They have a lot of rainfall there in the winter. So I think all of these environmental conditions have created a very special, what the French call terroir. And that means all of the conditions that when you put them together and you grow one specific plant in that area, that has a recognition for having a special taste that then you associate with that cannabis tastes like Humboldt. We call that the taste of the place.
Yeah.
And so it's the same way that in France there's an area for champagne, and only that area is called champagne from the plants that you grow there, the wine that is made from that area, because it's recognized that that special combination creates the best champagne.
Yeah.
And so it's the same for cannabis in Humboldt. Those special areas, for some reason, that combination of soil and air and rain and maybe the farmer's love and dedication over generations creates some of the best cannabis on the planet.
Yeah, that's amazing. Also, the cannabis there grows outdoors only, right?
Yes.
So that's my next question. Like, since I've come here to Canada, obviously Canada doesn't have that much land too, and the weather doesn't permit it. But most people say like outdoor is not the best. But then you have
most people have not smoked Humboldt cannabis.
Yeah, I don't know. Like what I've heard is like the more you grow outdoor, the less the THC is, and obviously THC doesn't determine everything. But
the more you grow outdoor, the less the THC is.
That's what I've heard here.
No, that's silly, because THC is a product of UV rays.
Yeah.
So the sun has better UV rays than most indoor light setups.
Yeah.
I think the kind of mythology is that outdoor is somehow not as pristine as indoor because people are afraid of bugs and dust or whatever, which is just silly. What other food do you consume that you would say indoor is better? Indoor grapes, indoor tomatoes, indoor lettuce.
Not really.
It's just silly.
Yeah.
And it's not true. Because I don't know, anybody who has grown fruits and vegetables in their own backyard in the soil and nurtured that and then compared that to what you're getting from the store, first of all, it's fresher.
Yeah.
The flavor is much more robust. So, yeah, I think people are, first of all, they don't have a choice here. They have long winters. There's very limited area where they actually have a season long enough to grow outdoor. But I think you do have some amazing outdoor in Canada, but probably
BC,
more on the West Coast. And so, you need to come to Humboldt and smoke Humboldt and stop believing the Canadians that are talking to you about indoor.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I was wondering, because in India, there's obviously it's illegal, so everything that grows there is first of all natural, and especially in mountains, like it's more than 12 hours of sun, so it all grows natural, and the hash is obviously
amazing.
Yeah,
some of the best charas on the planet comes from northern India in the Himachal Pradesh, and part of that too is altitude, because the higher up they're getting, the type of UV rays that are coming to the plants really have a strong impact on that cannabinoid and terpene production. Who in their right mind would say, nah, the Himachal Pradesh charas is inferior to the stuff that we're growing in an indoor grow in Bombay? Nobody would suggest that.
Have you been to India yet or no?
Yeah, I was with Frenchy.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we met in Nepal.
Oh.
We met in Nepal on June 2nd, 1980.
That's amazing. Yeah, so you have... did you explore the parts where he was actually making hash with
I didn't go up that far because there was no water up there, and he was staying for 3 months, and I was not going to stay in a place without water for 3 months. But no, we met in Nepal, but I had traveled overland from Bangladesh to Calcutta and then went to Nepal, met him. We spent some time together, and then it was like, okay, I'm going to India. And I ran into Frenchy 3 times in India randomly.
Oh.
In Delhi and Varanasi and in Pushkar. And at one point, his friend was like, you two are meant together. You keep running into each other.
Yeah.
And they said, we're having Frenchy's birthday in Ampi in a few weeks in December. Why don't you meet us there? And this was before cell phones. This was 1980. And I said, I was trying to be like cool, and I was like, well, if I have time, I'll see if my schedule allows. So I took a train the day before to Ampi, I'd never been there before in my life. It wasn't like we said, we're meeting somewhere specific in MP. And back in the time, there were some temple ruins there. So they had said, we're going to meet at these temple ruins. But it wasn't like I had a map or anything. I got off the train, and there, in my memory, there was like a field of banana plants. And for whatever reason, I thought, well, I'll walk through the field, and it must be on the other side. I swear, I started like 2 feet walking into this plantation of bananas, and Frenchy came around the corner and we ran into each other.
That's amazing. Yeah, actually, I am from MP too, so I don't know where you went, but yeah, I'm from MP too. I feel
temples
like
are probably gone now. There was a river, and there were temple ruins along the river.
I think you have traveled more India than me, because I've never gone to Pushkar, never gone to any of these places. So that's pretty amazing that you guys are actually promoting all of that culture that you saw back then, and it was more open, I guess. Because I remember him telling me that he used to get cannabis from bhang shops at that time, like buds and stuff. So which became illegal after that. So that culture, I guess, was more of a more traditional, like even you could say hippie culture back then, 80s. So yeah,
I think it hadn't gone into the level of prohibition that we have now. But to a large degree, he was making all his own. He was spending 3-4 months up in the mountains.
Yeah.
He was renting fields from local people, and then bringing what we needed down to Goa when he spent the winter there.
Yeah, I mean, one more thing is that cannabis, or you could say Indian hash, or you could say Moroccan hash. All of those hash, I don't think they can be commercialized as much, but they have their own place in the industry. I don't think like people here at California would grow and then start hand rubbing cannabis.
I think Charas is a special culture because, again, going back to the terroir, you're in an environment in the Himachal Pradesh in northern India there that's semi-tropical. You have, the snow in the winter, but yet you have a very humid condition with a lot of rain during other times in the year.
Yeah.
So you have too much moisture for that to be something that's traditionally easy to use as sieving methodology like they do in Afghanistan, where they're using the beds with the sheets over them to sieve the dried material.
Yeah.
Because of that environment, the charas is stickier.
Yeah.
It's a way to keep the bugs off the plant. It works as a kind of protective system for the plant. Whereas when you go across the mountain into Afghanistan, that's a drier environment, if that material was sticky, all the dust that's coming, during the windstorms and whatnot, it would stick to the plant, and then it wouldn't be accessible for humans. So the plant kind of adapted to the local environment over the generations, over the eons, to meet the needs of the humans that it was serving. It's really amazing when you think that, from a bird's fly distance, those two types of plants are not very far apart from each other, but because of the environmental conditions, they're radically different.
I didn't know sieving was a traditional method, though. I thought it was like a modern way to extract hash.
Not in Afghanistan. They've been doing that for, probably thousands of years, I think. I mean, when we look at archaeological ruins and what artifacts are, found that humans were using from way, long time ago, sieves are one of the oldest tools that are found.
Yeah.
We figured out pretty quickly that if we could, use a sieve, we could separate the part of the food that we didn't want to eat from the part that we did in gathering seeds or working with wheat or,
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I also heard like people adding opium to their hash in Afghanistan because both of them are readily available there. So it's more, I guess it depends from where you are. But do you think any commercialization of those kind of hash in...
So how much of that is actual truth and how much of that is urban legend? Because I never saw that when we were in India.
Yeah.
And the two cultures are very separate.
Yeah.
The culture of opium is for somebody who's more introverted or is in pain, and it runs the challenge of addiction. Charas is, I remember when we were in northern India, some of those older didis, they would have the kind of like a backpack that you carry sticks in.
Yeah.
They'd be smoking the charas and walking up the mountain so strong, and we would be kind of running and to keep up with them.
Yeah.
Charas consumption locally is really good for the health. It's like all cannabis use is therapeutic, but most of the Westerners don't realize that we're using it as a therapy. I think in traditional cultures, they did realize that it like relieves pain when you're older. Frenchy used to say smoking charas gave him an overall feeling of well-beingness, both psychologically and in his body. And I think this is the big differentiator between the use of opiates and the use of cannabis. Both can be used for pain management, but how it does that with the body is very different.
Yeah.
I think there's a place for both. And I can't think from a commercial level why you would want to mix the two, honestly. And also just from a safety level, you wouldn't want to mix the two.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, opium obviously is the biggest problem in the US right now. Opioid crisis is the biggest, and that's why a lot of pharmaceutical companies are now losing money because cannabis is legal now.